welcome to this analysis of the Red Bull Salzburg versus AC Milan game. In this video, we're going to tactically analyse how Red Bull Salzburg sought to get the best out of their counter-press and dynamism, as well as also how AC Milan looked to overload the left-hand side and the tactical changes that they made in the second half. And with that, let's have a look at Red Bull Salzburg's build-up. So Red Bull Salzburg looked to bypass AC Milan's 3-3-1-3 press, with the goalkeeper throwing out early or passing early before AC Milan could set up. Moving into midfield possession, Red Bull Salzburg played in a 2-4-4 with a diamond in midfield and having their fullbacks push up into those wide spaces, allowing their forwards Fernando and Okafor to tuck in more centrally. Whilst the diamond was flexible before his substitution, Sevold held it down as the CDM. Salzburg often looked to try and play dynamically in those wide spaces, using the fact that their centre midfielders could flow over to those sides to combine quickly and try and release their forwards or their fullbacks into those channels, who would then look to create a chance more centrally. Of course, with your fullbacks high like this, there is a potential to be exposed, but there's also the advantage that with your fullbacks high, you can counter press, which is what Salzburg did on lots of possession. Salzburg struggled to maintain the intensity of the first 60 minutes or so throughout the game, struggling especially once Fernando was subbed off. As Okafor and Fernando provided a lot of dynamism and trickery, they allowed Salzburg to be able to play through the lines into them when they split out into the wide areas, but also provided Salzburg with the option of long balls into the channels where they were both willing runners, which obviously had a knock-on effect in that it allowed the rest of Salzburg to be able to then make supporting runs and also maintain possession. And with that, let's have a look at an example. Starting with an example in the 11th minute, AC Milan had won a free kick on the right-hand side, and they swung in across, but it was defended. Whilst we got him here, Capaldo was tasked with being relatively defensive to try and counteract Hernandez, who was constantly flying on that left-hand side. So we have that same Capaldo playing it up from that right-hand side, helping to start the next Salzburg attack. Sevold here is looking to escape the AC Milan pressure. Of course, this is just from AC Milan's free kick, so this isn't quite AC Milan's typical pressing shape, although I do have to point out Hernandez's high position, which was something you'd also see on the other side when AC Milan pressed. So typically they pressed in what looked like a 3-3-1-3, where your right back Calabria pushed into kind of a centre defensive midfield position, and so we're seeing a relatively similar thing here, although again this is from a free kick. So Sevold seeks to keep the momentum of the attack going. He sprays it out wide into Okafor. Point to mention here the movement of the centre forwards for RB Salzburg. This is something that they typically did, where they look to try and split and try and abuse their pace in those channels. Note also Tomori, the left centre-back for AC Milan, how he stepped out. He was expected to do this, as well as also Kalulu, when the centre-forwards for RB Salzburg looked to drop, which they did on occasion, when the full-backs for RB Salzburg were looking to play those balls through the lines. On this occasion, Okafor isn't successful trying to dribble inside, although on other occasions, I'd say both him and Fernando posed a real threat with their trickery, their dynamism. It allowed the rest of the RB Salzburg team to be able to catch up and support. Quick note on the AC Milan goal scorer Silimakis, he was more consistently defensively positioned when AC Milan were out of possession, so we see that here, whereas Leao on the left hand side for AC Milan didn't necessarily come back as deep, with the hope being that when AC Milan win the ball back, if they have the opportunity to counter-attack, he's higher up the pitch, but also he saves energy. And so AC Milan are able to regain possession. Tonali, AC Milan's number 8, who dropped to fill in when Tomori had pushed up, looks to release the ball here for Hernandez. Very strong runner throughout this game. And again, note, Leao still not deep here. He's much higher up on this left-hand side, potentially looking to take advantage of the fact that Salzburg like to do this counter press. And so you can see that here with the body shape of Kiergaard, who's looking to press Hernandez. And so RB Salzburg are successful in their pressure in this wide space with, as I mentioned, Leao very high up on this left-hand side. So when Hernandez looked to play that ball up the line, it was intercepted here by Dedic rather than Leao being able to continue the momentum of the attack. So RB Salzburg are able to then play the ball immediately back into Fernando, and just as Okafor had done on this left-hand side, Fernando is going to look to make this a duel between himself and the centre-back and use his trickery and pace as almost a winger on this near side. Unfortunately for Tomori, he gets too tight and Salzburg are able to win a free kick. Next, having a look at Milan, they typically built up in a 2-3-2-3 with Benacer as the holding midfielder and Tonali pushing higher up but always towards the left-hand side. In his position higher up on that left-hand side versus Salzburg's 4-1-3-2 press, he always had space and often received the ball in there, allowing Hernandez to be able to make a run from deep, often on track. This was a means of AC Milan progressing the ball from deep, which Salzburg struggled to deal with throughout the game. In midfield possession, AC Milan moved to a 3-1 or a 3-2 with the Milan captain Calabria as a third centre-back, allowing Hernandez to push higher up on that left-hand side, utilising his greater technical and running ability in comparison to the right-back. On the right-hand side, Salzbrug was the one holding the width, providing crosses from the right-hand side and also an outball. AC Milan sought to overload the left-hand side, as I mentioned, with the position of Tonali high up on the left, as well as also Hernandez's driving runs, and with Leao for most of the game, except maybe from the 46th to the 60th minute, holding his position wide on the left-hand side. Later in the game, they moved to more of a 2-3 or a 2-4. Pobega, coming on for Benacer, seemed to have been asked to provide cover for Hernandez, who continued to make those marauding runs on the left-hand side, but he also pushed up a little bit at times. Leao was allowed to drift, at least initially in the second half, to attempt to combine in the more central area, just get him to have more touches and exert more of an influence on the game. Eventually, he reverted back to his left wing, more traditional position, and Milan continued to try and overload that left-hand side. When they did, and Dest had come on for Calabria, then he would tuck in to become a right CDM in anticipation of a Red Bull Salzburg counter-attack. With Origi on rather than Giroud, Milan had the option of playing both through the lines as they did with Giroud, but also they could play passes in behind the defence, as Origi is considerably more mobile. Giroud provided a relatively more static focal point, which it was difficult for Milan to connect with, given that Pavlovic was quick to track him whenever he dropped in that central space. And with that, let's have a look at an example. In this scenario, in the 51st minute, we have initially a short pass from the free kick, with Salzburg set up in their 2-3 shape, although this is a diamond midfield with Kamari at the top. Ulmer is able to play the ball down the line into Okafor, the left forward who splits into this left-hand side channel. This is a good moment to point out AC Milan's pressing shape before we see it again. So we've got a 3-3 and then 1, and then with Giroud and the other forwards a 3-3-1-3. Here we've got the right back Calabria moving from right back into like a right CDM position. From here, Okafor is going to look to try and turn, face up the defender and try and dribble, allowing time for the rest of these centre midfielders to be able to support him, as well as also the fullback for Salzburg. Both Ulmer and Dedic were happy to get up the pitch and almost play as wide midfielders if Salzburg had sustained possession. I think it's important to just mention that this is Kalulu. This is your right centre back, and he's continued his aggression against Okafor despite the distance between himself and the rest of the back line. Kalulu's persistence pays off and Okafor is forced to play the ball backwards, and from there AC Milan are able to press RB Salzburg into playing a pass back all the way to the keeper. AC Milan don't quite set up the press similar to how they did before with a 3-3-1-3, in that here we've got that Salzburg isn't quite as high as he would have been in the previous example. Anyway, from here Salzburg look to play the ball quicker, high tempo, and play the ball immediately into Fernando, running in behind, taking advantage of the space created by Milan's press. Milan's keeper Maignan plays the ball early on that left-hand side into Tonali, who dropped into a left-back position, which allowed Hernandez to immediately get on his bike. Tonali plays the ball up the line into Leao. On other occasions where AC Milan play the ball up the line like this, it was usually Tonali who would be here on the line, with Hernandez starting deeper, playing the ball into Tonali, who could then drag Cabaldo into the wide space, creating a channel for Hernandez to run up the pitch. On this occasion, Cabaldo is able to win the ball back because Leao's pass back into Hernandez wasn't quite accurate enough, likely due to Milan playing the ball in those wide spaces, looking to take advantage of one of the key players in Leao, as well as also the pace of Salzburg on his right-hand side. Giroud wasn't always involved beyond being a focal point for long balls, whereas Origi provided options both short as well as also running in behind due to his greater mobility. With that, thanks for watching. The next video is going to be on the Women's Super League, but if you enjoy the content, please have a look at the 2021-22 Champions League playlist, as well as also the current season playlist. And with that, we're out.